Today's recap is a thriller about an American couple that moves to a new apartment in Bucharest. Julia and Francis, an American couple, relocate to Bucharest. They move into an apartment with a big window. One night Julia notices a man looking from the window at the building across the street into her apartment and watching her. She turned the lights off and watched him back when suddenly Francis came home, asked her what she is staring off. Later they went down for a walk, and when they got back, they saw an ambulance in front of their building. One guy sat there and watched her. The next day Julia watched the news and saw a report, and she recognized what she had seen last night. There was also an image of a young girl. She asked Francis to translate it for her. He said it seemed like a murder. Suddenly she sees an interview with the man from last night, and Francis tells her that this man found the girl's body. Julia starts to look for the murderer of the girl on the internet, and she finds out about a serial killer, dubbed the Spider by local media, who beheaded young women. She becomes very suspicious and feels like a man is following her. One morning while walking the street, she decides to enter a cinema. She gets scared and flees. Later she entered the supermarket and saw someone watching her again. She panicked and fled. When she is home, she tells Francis about it, and they visit the market to review the security footage, but they can't be sure about this man. Julia meets her neighbor Irina, and she invites her for a drink. She shows her a pistol her ex-boyfriend Christian gave her for protection. Later that night, Julia sees the man in the window again. She waves to him, and he waves back, convinced that it was the same man who followed her. When Francis was back home, she told him about it, and they called the police. Francis accompanies the officer to this man's flat while Julia watches from the window. When Francis returns, he tells her that this guy's name is Daniel Weber, and it is not the man she saw at the supermarket. One day, Julia follows Daniel, and she sees him enter a strip club, where he works as a janitor. Irina, her neighbor who works there as a club dancer, spots her. Julia asks about him, but Irina tells her that she knows nothing about him. In the middle of the night, Julia, awake from a nightmare, hears a commotion in Irina's apartment. Julia convinces the landlady to unlock the apartment, but Irina isn't there. Francis believes Julia's fears are imagined and points to the fact that it is probably paranoia. The next day, Christian, Irina's ex-boyfriend, arrives and joins Julia in searching for Irina. They go to Daniel's apartment and knock on the door, but there is no answer. Julia tries again to knock on his door by herself, but an older man opens the door. Later that evening, a police officer arrives at their apartment accompanied by Daniel. He accuses Julia of stalking him. The officer explains that the incident is a misunderstanding. The next evening she goes with Francis to a company event. They argue, and she goes away. On her way home at the metro, she sees Daniel, who sits in front of her. He starts talking and explains that he is caring for his father. He also said that his voyeurism toward her, that it is because he is bored, when suddenly Julia notices what appears to be the outline of a severed head in his shopping bag. Julia returns home and begins packing. While packing she hears loud music from Irina's apartment. She tries to find out what is going on and sees that the flat door is open. There, she sees Irina's headless corpse, when Daniel suddenly attacks her and chokes her with a plastic bag. After Julia regains consciousness, Daniel describes how he killed Irina and hid with her body when Julia and the landlady entered the flat. Julia hears Francis approach their flat, but Daniel cuts her throat as she tries to scream. Francis calls Irina's phone and hears the cell phone ring at Irina's flat. He sees Daniel exiting the flat, but Julia, who pretends dead, shoots Daniel with Irina's pistol, killing him. She steps out of Irina's flat, covered in blood, stares at Francis. Thanks for watching. For more content, please subscribe to the channel.